talking about Gráinne Mhaol ní Bhaile, or Grace O'Malley. Okay, so I gave you a chance to listen to this song Ó Róise de Bheatha Bhaile during the break, and Gráinne Mhaol is mentioned in the song. So you can see, like, the English translation, Gráinne O'Malley is coming over the sea, armed warriors along her as her guard. They're Irish themselves, not French or Spanish. The reason that that's mentioned is because it was always either the French helping the Irish to drive the English out of Ireland, or the Spanish. So it was the Spanish in 1601, and it was the French in 1796. So they were relying on Irish help this time from abroad. Okay, so let's look a little bit at Gráinne Mhaol. So she was born in County Mayo in 1530, and she was the daughter of a Taoiseach. Okay, so the Taoiseach's name is Owen O'Malley, or Owen O'Malley in English. Now, Owen is the Irish for John. There are two Irish versions of the English name John, or the French name Jean. So there's Owen, which comes from the Latin Johannes, right? So that's one version of John. And then Sean, which comes from the French Jean. Okay, so the French Jean, when the Normans came, who were French speakers, came and took over Ireland in 1169, they brought that name with them, so that influenced the Irish, and they started using the name Sean. O'Malley, by the way, there, the O means from, and Malley is a person, so from Mali, if you like, descended from this person, Mali. So she was the daughter of Owen and Mairead, right, or Margaret, as she would be known in English. So Owen was the Taoiseach, or the leader, or chieftain of the Bhaile clan. So Taoiseach is also the name of the Prime Minister of Ireland today. So we use that term still, but the original meaning was that it was the chieftain or leader of the clan, as I was saying. Now, Owen O'Malley, he was a powerful merchant, and he often sailed to Spain as well on business. So there are very strong maritime connections between the west of Ireland, places like Galway in particular, and Spain. One of the reasons is because the winds, they usually make it very easy for you to travel down to Spain or up to Ireland. Okay, so when Gráinne was just a small child, she would long to go on long sea voyages with her father. So she really wanted to be a sailor as well. However, at that time, first of all, she was a child, and secondly, the crew of ships were exclusively men in Ireland at the time, and Gráinne wasn't happy with that. So according to folklore, one day Gráinne asked her father if she could come with him on another long voyage that he was going on. So Owen refused. So he said, look, Gráinne, you can't come with me. The sea is far too dangerous a place for a young girl like you. Gráinne was very, very disappointed, and she went off home. And what she did was she dressed herself in her brother's clothes, and she cut her hair, and she cut her hair short, very short like the boys, and pretended that she was a boy. And when her father saw her, sorry, I was translating this from Irish and I forgot to delete that part. So she went home. That's how you say she went home in Irish, a bhaile lé. So she went home, and her father saw her, and he laughed at her when he saw her dressed up as a boy, and then he decided to allow her to come on the boat with him. So he took her on board. That means he took her onto the boat. So it is said that she got the nickname Gráinne Mhaol from that. So translated into English, Gráinne Buail means baldy Gráinne. Okay, so bald is like me when you have no hair or very short hair on the top of your head. So that's where she got that name. And yeah, so ever since, even though she let her hair grow after that, she was known by that nickname due to her short hair. Now, Gráinne got married when she was 16. You know, girls would get married when they were quite young in those days because people generally lived much shorter lives. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna, yeah, thanks, Maria Teresa, you're back now. So she got married when she was 16 to a chieftain or a Taoiseach from Galway, a Taoiseach who was the leader of the O'Flaherty family, Donald O'Flaherty or Daniel O'Flaherty. And she went to live with him in Coshawen. Coshawen is a place in Connemara. Coshawen means next to the river in County Galway. And they have 3 children. So her first child was Owen, named after her father. And she had a daughter called Mairead, named after her mother. And Maracha was the other child that they had. Now, Gráinne's interest in ships and in seafaring and in the sea grew. And it wasn't long before she was in command of her own fleet of naval ships. With these ships, she took command of the seaways into the port of Galway City. She demanded that a tax be paid by sea merchants traveling in and out of the city. So there was a lot of trade coming from Spain, coming from England, coming from different parts of Europe into Galway. So there was a lot of money to be had in this trade. Galway was the principal trading city along with Limerick in the west of Ireland. And this really annoyed those merchants, of course, because they saw her as a pirate. This picture is from a comic book about Gráinne Buail by Bruno Pull and Gisela Usato. So Gráinne's power soon meant that she controlled all of the coastline of West Galway and much of the coastline of the west of Ireland. And she made a lot of different enemies, but she was a brave soldier and she was an excellent sailor. And remember, this was a time when, you know, very few women had any political power. So she was exceptional. You know, she was a great fighter and an excellent pilot of her ships. Her husband, Donald O'Flaherty, he died in 1565. So Gráinne was 35 at that time, and he had been killed in battle. So Gráinne avenged his death. That means that she murdered the person who had murdered her husband. And then she became the leader of the O'Flaherty clan. And then she herself, as well as being the leader of her clan, she married Ristard Burke a year later, right? He was from County Mayo in a place called Carrig on Cowlick, or Fleet Rock, as it's named in English. You can see a picture of the castle there that she lived in. That still exists in Mayo in Clune Bay. So she became the leader of the O'Flaherty clan, and also she joined up with the Burke clan. So she was extremely powerful. They had one son. His name was Tiboid. Now, as I was saying to you earlier, Elizabeth was the Queen of England at this time, and the English, under the Tudors, they were trying to stamp their authority in Ireland. And they had managed to subdue the majority of the chieftains of the various clans or the various families around Ireland. My clan name is Machafuil, and we held power in Tyrone and in Cavan. And there were clans that were in control of territory all around Ireland. Now, some of them had agreed to see Elizabeth as their queen. Others didn't want to accept English rule. Gráinne was one of them, who refused to lie down and surrender. So the English attacked her castle at Fleet Rock or Carrig on Cowlick. But Grania, at first, she managed to fight them off. However, she was subsequently captured and she was put in prison. However, she refused to surrender to the Queen. Her son-in-law, right, the husband of one of her daughter, Mairead, he rescued her and he fled to Ulster to look for help from O'Neill. Now, O'Neill was the most powerful chieftain in Ireland, and he was the person who had refused to submit to English power. So they planned to get help from England's main enemy at the time, the Spanish. So he planned to get help from the Spanish Armada, or Spanish fleet. Armada is the Spanish word for a fleet or a navy. As we say, cowlig is the word in Irish. So he wanted to get help from them to drive the English out of Ireland, because the Irish couldn't do it on their own at this time. So Sir Richard Bingham, who was the English viceroy at that time, he was leading English forces in Ireland, and he wanted to completely destroy Grania and her family. And he calls her at the time the nurse to all rebellions in Ireland. And Bingham reported her to Queen Elizabeth. And this was very serious, because she would be, if she was accused of treason, for example, treason is the crime of being disloyal to your monarch. She could be sentenced to death and hung, drawn, and quartered. You see in the picture there what happens to people if they're hung, drawn, and quartered. Their legs and arms are separated from one another by a horse. So it's a very cruel death. And you get hung alive as well, and you get your guts, your small intestine taken out and burnt while you're still alive. So it's an incredibly cruel death. So she was threatened with that kind of torture. Grania's eldest son, Owen, was killed then by Bingham's brother. Grania was captured in the governor's headquarters, and she was called a traitor, and she was sentenced to death at this time. Okay, now, sorry, just go on to the next slide. Now, in 1593, Bingham kidnapped her son as well, Tybalt, and threw him into prison. Grania managed to escape, right? She's sometimes known as Grace in English, Grania in Irish as well. So Grania managed to escape from prison, but her son was kidnapped by Bingham, the governor of the English in Ireland, right, who resided in Dublin Castle. So in an act of desperation on Grania's part, she made the dangerous decision of traveling over to London to talk to the Queen in person. So she was threatened with being put in prison by the Queen and executed by the Queen in London there and then. So it was a real chance that she took. However, Grania was welcomed in Elizabeth's court, and Elizabeth liked her. They actually spoke to one another in Latin. Both of them were polyglots and great linguists. Grania spoke Spanish and Italian fluently. She also spoke Latin, English, and Irish. She refused, though, to speak to Elizabeth in English and preferred to speak in a language that both of them spoke very well, Latin. They also spoke together, according to folklore, in Spanish, which Elizabeth understood well as well. So the two women who respected one another, they struck an agreement together, and Elizabeth basically promised to stay out of Grania's business if Grania herself promised to be loyal to the Queen. So Grania thought that this was a good agreement, and through this agreement, Tybalt was released, and Bingham was sent back to England, sort of with his tail between his legs, and he was, given a telling off by Elizabeth. So Grania spent the rest of her life in her castle in Carrick-on-Cowlick until her death in 1603, and 400 years later, her fame and her bravery are still spoken of. So can you match these events with her life? So she was born anyway in 1530. What happened in 1546? Well, she married Donald
Those
Flaherty.
married.
Yeah. Then in 1565, her first husband died when she was 35. In 1566, what happened?
She
He
married,
again.
Yeah, she got married to
Married
Richard
again.
Burke, right? Now, Burke, you mentioned, ye being that you're interested in Irish surnames. Burke or de Burke was a Norman surname. So at this stage, the Normans no longer spoke French. They now spoke Irish as their first language. And they took on Irish customs, and also they changed their names to Irish spellings. So de Burke was the original French name, and it became de Burke in Irish. And then she traveled to London in 1593 and spoke to Elizabeth, and they came to this agreement. And then she eventually passed away in her castle in Carrig on Howlig in 1603. Okay, so how old was she when she died? Well, 73, if you can do the maths. Now, here are some true and false questions as well. I won't go through each of these because we're running out of time, unfortunately. But maybe you can do these on your own, right? I'll just show you the answers there. And also there are some links for you to visit to see some further information about Grania, and there's a documentary link as well that I've given you there. And I will send you the link to the video and the link to the PowerPoint by email, okay? And I'll send them to you later today. Okay, guys, so look, we have to finish up there, but thank you very much for attending. Very nice to meet you, Ibin, and hopefully we will have the other student, Claudia, when she joins us next week.